Okay, I think we're live.
Back
So,
again.
so values, maybe masculinity and femininity. I really liked where we left off with the
Hmm.
last conversation because I felt like we were getting into some disagreements that were pretty fruitful, particularly around the idea of a social hierarchy, why we have social hierarchies, how we organize them, and whether or not we could change them for better or worse. But before getting into hierarchies, I guess I want to level set again on how we are both defining values and what they mean for how we act in the world. So I can go first if that's cool with you.
Yeah, go ahead. That'll give me some ground. So I'm like, I'll go on a tangent with this one. So,
Okay. So I simply think of values as preferences. We are biological organisms that prefer to survive. And when I'm thinking about humans in particular, although also mammals and other living organisms, I'm talking about the whole being. So not just the human self that is thinking or the ego that perceives itself as the center of conscious experience. I think of you, Tay, as the whole person. So you and your consciousness and your embodied unconsciousness. So I think of values as, like I said, preferences that are oriented towards keeping us alive, towards, from an evolutionary perspective, helping us push our genes out as far into the future as possible. And with those values as preferences, they guide how we perceive and attend to the world and therefore how we can act in the world. And so, one example, I've got a cup of water right here. With this cup, there's a lot of information. There are many things that I can do with the cup in terms of functional utility. So like I can tap the cup, I can drink from it, obviously, I can hold it, I can throw it. There's so many what are called affordances within this one object, but I don't usually perceive all of those affordances and all of those behavior patterns. I perceive one that's aligned with my current values for whatever it is that I need. So that's kind of the relationship between values and perception and action. So I'll pause there.
okay. And so, what I'll build on when I think about values, what I would say is so I correlate values to, so I'll put it this way. I separate the value of something from like personal values or morality. Those are kind of different to me. Now, they correlate because something's value in general. This is what we talk about like societal values or societal ideas to personal ideas. This is the same concept here. I separate those things a bit because the purpose of a thing, what a thing is built for instance, like if something is valued for what it's designed for, there's value for something outside of what it's designed for when a creative mind is involved. So for me, value is situational. So your personal values, they are refined throughout your life, how you value things and what you think a thing can be used for. But the range of that shift is based off your perception of that thing and what you allow it to be used for. I hope I'm not overcomplicating this. But so what I'm trying to say is that I believe that I mean the statement I say a lot is that we don't properly understand value. I say that because we look at everything from a stagnant viewpoint and we don't allow it to be fluid enough in how we perceive its value. So so when we talk about like quantum thinking, so I'll just say I'll put it this way and then we can kind of talk on it a bit. So like when we talk about like values, this idea of like quantum value, like there's the potential of a thing, and then there's what it's good for in the actual moment. And so those are the two ranges that we talk about. So like for me, value and discernment come in is like your ability to determine all the values that a thing has in the moment that you're in. That's determining value to me. And then there's the understanding that I shouldn't limit something to on what it's valuable for in the moment because it still has quantum value and possibilities that I can't see. And I'll put it there and I'll leave a pin in it and we can kind of talk around that.
You used an example before about someone with normal color vision and someone who's colorblind looking at the world and how they see two different worlds or they perceive two different worlds.
Hmm.
And if someone were to ask the question, well, which vision of the world is correct? I'm imagining that you would think this, and I think I agree that, well, they're both correct in a sense. Like reality is potential, or reality can be conceptualized as potential. And when a creative mind encounters reality, there's a relational reality, I guess, that is experienced. And so let me pause there to see, do we agree on that kind of metaphysical point? You know,
Yes,
what
I
do you think
agree
of
because
that conception of reality as potential that we can then extract meaning from when we come and interact with it?
yeah, I mean, yeah, of course. So like even let's take it, let's not even take it a level like if two people stand in the same place, they'll describe different things. They're seeing the exact same moment, the exact same position. I mean, even if you take it to where they're the same height, they're the same whatever, they're technically seeing the same thing. But even at that level, like you said, a person being colorblind, a person being nearsighted, a person being farsighted, there's a range there. But the reality, what they're perceiving, is stagnant at some level.
Hmm.
And their perception of that thing is what's changing.
And so, taking that example, two people, let's say, watching the same video. I mean, this just happened with a recent political event, but we don't have to make it political. Just two people watching the same video. You ask them about it afterwards, they'll give two different descriptions to some degree. Would you say that part of the reason that they offered two different descriptions is because they attended to or prioritized different parts of information in the video? And then, in some sense, that means that they had some degree of different values.
Yeah, basically. So their attention to certain details determines what they put in. So their values determine what they notice from the video. So let's talk about memory. So I believe when we talk about memory, I'm a firm believer that you only remember the things that are exciting to you or that cause a difference in mentality. You don't remember the boring moments. You don't remember sitting down and waiting. You don't even remember how long it took sometimes for you to sit and wait. But if you pay attention to life, your greatest memories are either the most shocking or the most informational. So it's like there's an aspect of this that your experience determines what you pay attention to and how you pay attention to a space because it determines what's important for you to pay attention to. For instance, me coming up in any space, the first thing I'm looking at is how to get out of here. If something happens, I need to exit. I'm not comfortable into a space until I know how I can exit. Everybody doesn't have that mindset. The second thing I'm looking for, who in here is dangerous? I just need to know how many people in here might have a weapon. I want to know because if noise comes from an area and one of the people I think that has a weapon over there, I'm going to react a certain way. I'm always situationally aware. I'm in my house looking at locked doors when I don't need to. Not because I'm like there's a fear thing, but that was I was raised to be cautious because I was in a lot of parties, a lot of shootouts, a lot of different things happen where wasn't paying attention, might not have seen it. But to other people, they can be out, club, drunk, fall asleep. I can't fall asleep in the club bar. I'm not. There's no chance. But I value my life a certain way.
Now, I'm going to make two moves here. The first move is tying this idea of values in the present to our ancestral values. So you mentioned how experience plays a role in driving the pattern of attention that you overlay on the world. I would accept that and then go further back and say, from a biological standpoint, you are born with these emotions that are innate within you. They're pre-wired to make you experience the world in a certain way, given a certain situation. And you could argue that those emotions are what we can consider as ancestral memories. You know, we have fear because the predisposition to protect yourself and run away at the sight of things that might be threatening was adaptive to our ancestors for who knows how long, millions of years. And so, in some sense, your emotions are a connection to your ancestral values that play a role also in your present values. What do you think about that?
So that goes back to, I believe you mentioned it before, epigenetics. So when you look at the study on epigenetics, you realize that there is an aspect of our genome that we're building on top of or continuing on. And so we look at it as nature. You realize that why do animals that were born know where to go? How do they know how to navigate? How do they know birds know how to fly north? Things of that nature. There's some aspect of your subconscious mind that I would agree is pre-programmed. And it's pre-programmed so that you can improve upon it. And so I would argue that mm, I'd argue that we're our the mentalities that we have that are rigid are there for our safety. Like you said, a lot of it's due to safety or security, or just knowing how to survive or know how to react to certain things. And I do believe those in I'll put it this way. I believe we have when you're born, like you people look at astrology. I look at it the same way. Your astrology is basically your parents' bodies telling you what energy you're born into. When they accepted semen, when the fertilized egg, that whole process requires your parent's body to be in some type of an alignment. That alignment that you're born into is in tune with your genetic or ancestry, and that connects those values. So you have when you read your astrology and the planets that are there, to me, you're reading what your ancestors gave you to start with. That's your starting point. It's your starting arrangement. And then as you live through life and you experience different things, you determine what you're able to grow past and what you're still limited to.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. I'm make another move. Well, I guess I can just ask the question. Do you believe that there are adaptive and maladaptive values? And it doesn't have to be a strict binary, but do you believe that there are value hierarchies and value systems that can lead you to attend to and perceive the world in a maladaptive way, and then there are some that are good and lead you to perceive and attend to the world in adaptive
Yeah.
ways?
Yeah, I think our ability to understand the good and bad of a thing is what gives you a balanced vision. I think sometimes people get too attached to the bad version of a story or the good version of a story, and that's why they aren't able to look at the reality of a thing. Let's put it this way. So, sex before marriage. Some people consider it blasphemy. You see what I'm saying? But some people, if they hadn't had sex with their partner before marriage, wouldn't have realized that they didn't have a real connection with them. So it's a one of those things where it's kind of either or. You can either believe that sex before marriage is blasphemy and that after you have sex you're ruined and rotten. Because if you believe that and you accidentally have a drunk night of sex, now your entire life is shit. You have to grow past this value. You have to reform past it. So it's a good value, but you could be put in a situation where you're required to reform past it. Or you could not have that value and never have that hang up, but now you have an early STD or something because you were careless. So I believe both sides have their lessons that come with them, and our ability to navigate these good and bad values is how we grow in life. So yes, I do believe that there are values that if you attach to them can bring you negative results. And there are values that if you attach to them that can bring you positive results. But I don't believe that any value innately is good or bad. I believe it's dependent on your positioning and your goals, I guess is a good way of putting that. Because and then this is where we get into this weird space where it's like socially and personally. Because like, okay, personally, I don't care if someone thinks that I'm a sinner because I had sex before marriage. That's just my personal opinion. But I also do don't want to just, I'm not saying that I just want to sign up for hell here. You feel what I'm saying? Like, that's not necessarily my opinion. But because my beliefs don't really correlate with those values, see how we get into this sticky place where somewhere socially, we live in a Christian country. So, based off our country's values, sex before marriage is a bad thing. But if you look at our country's media and what's going on here, So how do we really determine what's good and bad values if no one has any one book that they're actually sticking to? So the good and bad thing here is only it only matters if you're attached to a specific thought frame. Like there's no, you see what I'm saying? Like there's no like there's, and that's when we get like to the idea of like, okay, so why are things like the Ten Commandments necessary? Because there should be some general rule, like, hey, none of us do this. You know what I'm saying? But those things have been attached to religion. So you think about legal law. What are the laws of the land? Those are kind of, it's all an agreement, really, but what's good and bad here. You see what I'm saying? Like there's no real, like, I do believe that there's like a moral good and bad, but where is that line drawn and how do you determine it for different people?
So let me offer a solution. I like the way you de-emphasized, if I can say that, a static good and bad. And you emphasized what sounded to me more like the process of learning and transformation.
Yes.
Okay. Now, so I agree with that. And then I would also say that emphasizing the process of transformation, zooming in on that now, you can also extract out good and bad, but maybe we can call it a dynamic good and bad. So I would say that regardless of the specific values, if you are not learning or adapting, then that's bad.
Yes.
Okay.
Stagnation is bad, basically. So being not being able to adjust to the situation to me is bad. So your inability, so let's talk about what's bad. Bad is something personal to me. So if I go in a situation and I'm too rigid, what happens? I normally get beat up because the reality is moving. Now, if you're rigid but you're in the right alignment, it doesn't matter because if you're rigid and you're positioned in a place where the thing that you're stuck on is good, then it doesn't matter if you're rigid. But if you're rigid and you're in an environment where your belief system is not accepted, then you're usually fucked. So that's really what we're asking about here. It's like, where are you at? And are you morally sticking to one thing because you like, oh, I'm stuck on this and this is my morality and I can't change that? Or is it like situationally, if it makes sense for me to move different, I can. So for me, being bad is being in a situation where you've attached to something that can get you killed because you just don't want to change. And then, like you said, that would bring in people into the, well, this is the root. That gets you into that religious territory of like, well, I don't want to do this because of this. And it's like, there's lines there. You know what I'm saying? Like there are lines there.
I think that within the religious and sacred systems of value, there's a distinction that could be made between dogma and what I will say are the sacred archetypes, something like that. Uh,
Basically.
okay. That's fine for you.
Yeah, because like when I think of dogma, I think of the I separate religious practice from religious theology, if that makes sense. Like the theory of what religion was supposed to be and how it's actually practiced are separate to me. I don't believe people practice it the way it was theorized to be used. If that makes sense. Like if you look at Christianity on paper and go look at your average Christian, they're not fitting the bill. They're not. They don't stack up. And you can look at any religion. I'm not just picking on Christian. Go look at Muslim. Go look at the average one, not the devout one. And that's a reason. There's terms for it. We have terminologies for people that actually do what they're supposed to do. So that means that there's a majority of people that don't. And so that's really all I'm saying is that I don't believe that on paper. I understand what you should be doing if you practice certain religions. And I realize that we don't live in a world that allows you to actually even do it if you wanted to without completely exiling yourself from modern society.
So let's take the Christian example then, because there's not too much in what you said that I disagree with. I tend to conceptualize religion, specifically the Judeo-Christian religion, as attempting to characterize the process of transformation that we're discussing that is adaptive and leads to a pattern of learning that makes things better, but it also characterizes what better means. And so
Hmm.
it describes this ideal.
Utopia.
I didn't want to use that word because Christianity also is interesting, right? Because it has hell as well, right? And it's this idea that, well, kind of has hell. But you can imagine that there's hell and there's heaven, right? And the narrative, or at least one of the narrative plots throughout the entire Bible, so the Judeo-Christian narrative, it's a movement. It's a pattern of transformation. It's a sequence of stories that describes, obviously it starts with you being in, the Garden of Eden and then falling and then humanity attempting to find its way back. And part of me just thinks that one useful way, at least from a psychological perspective, of thinking about religion is as a characterization of a transformation that is always going to be imperfect, but if adhered to and if practiced, will help push humanity forward. And the aim, we'll use utopia, yeah. The aim is something like this ultimate ideal, or even from an individual standpoint in the Christian sense, the aim is to be like Christ. And the passion story is a characterization of humanity's ultimate ideal in Christ. Yes.
How many Christians have you met that told you you can't be Jesus?
You can't be Jesus. I mean, all of them, I guess.
But you're supposed to be Christ-like. So how can we not be working towards being like Jesus in the same time? Like you see how this doesn't work?
So I share in your concern. I share in your concern. I think that
We haven't
in
allowed ourselves to even see the possibility of what we could be because we told ourselves it's not something we should be aiming for.
okay. So I would, sorry, I misunderstood. Aiming at Christ, first of all, so there's understanding what Christ represents, there's aiming at him, and then there's actively practicing and trying to imitate him. And I think that as a culture, we fail on so many of those levels. But I think that I do think that that is one of the purposes of at least the Judeo-Christian tradition is to give you an ideal to to characterize the ideal, to make it something that's sufficiently motivating for you, and then to, in some sense, detail the steps of how you can transform yourself into that ideal while also acknowledging that you will never reach that ideal. I believe you said it before how we need a purpose that sufficiently motivates us to engage with the world, knowing that we are going to suffer. And so I think that in many traditions, this was understood. And so the best way that many of our ancestors had for trying to offer us a solution was in a narrative form. And I think that ultimately, again, the hero's journey is what this is. But I think I would just highlight the idea that the hero's journey first is a journey, which means that it's never ending, and second that there's something inherently limited and limiting when it comes to humans, as the hero in the journey is always falling and then getting back up and falling and getting back up. Like it's not a linear, trajectory of progress. Yeah, okay, I'll pause there.
So I'll put it this way. What I feel like I'm saying is the goal of the hero's journey in our archetype is for us to see ourselves as the hero. I believe in most religious practices, they've separated themselves from being able to identify as the hero. And so they're not able to personally integrate the lesson well enough, if that makes sense. So for me, it's not, I don't, I think the Jesus story is powerful. I think the Muhammad story is powerful. I think the Buddha story is powerful. But if you look at those stories as if it's a one-off, never gonna happen again, magical fairy fucking tale, then you can't see yourself in it. You can't understand how you could have the unconditional love that these beings have. You're not processing. So for me, the purpose of these stories is for us to figure out how we could process the world similar than some of these great characters. But if we tell ourselves that we can't be like these characters, we won't try hard enough. Now, I'm saying that the Christian faith completely or any faith completely removes it from it, but the way that it's practiced and the way that you sit in the church service and go through it, you're not actually being encouraged to really try as hard as you can to be like these people or to exemplify what they're doing. I just don't believe the way that I believe we've made our role models our gods in a sense. Like we're not really, and we still separate. And I'm not saying this is for now. Let me clarify here. We're not talking about someone that studied in these religions. That's this perception. We're talking about the average person that shows up to church and is trying to figure out where God is and what they perceive based off of the way that the lessons are taught and the conversation that's in the congregation. This is coming from a boy that's church. I grew up in the church. So I'm just talking about my experience and how I didn't feel encouraged to be like Jesus in my experience, but more so to use his perfect life as an excuse of why I could make a couple of mistakes along the way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, man, okay. We agree on so much, and I want to get to where we disagree because
Yeah.
that's where I struggled a little bit with our last conversation because I was trying to see how. So, okay, one part of what I heard you say, I'm gonna go step by step and just correct me if I'm wrong. Is it safe to say that you think that the hero's journey in some way represents the adaptive system of values?
Yes, I believe that the hero's journey depicts an example of how you should interact with different archetypes as you move along through the world.
Okay. And so one implication of that is that if if you understand the hero's journey and then do the opposite of that, then you are engaged in a process of transformation that is maladaptive.
Potentially. Because we don't
So,
know if the hero's journey is the only path up.
okay, it's the best one we got right now, though.
It's the most well spoken and it's the most well documented.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Because
And so
I
I
think,
want to add a point to that. So when we think about the idea of traveling up the tree of life or the tree of life, we talk about the path of the flaming sword. Or this is the idea of Michael's path from heaven to the Garden of Eden and back. And so this is what we would consider the hero's journey. This is the marked path. This is the one that most people know about culturally. This is what we know as the hero's journey. It's not the only way, but it's the best mapped way. Not only that.
let me try to add an evolutionary biological substrate to this to just make it a little bit deeper. Because I agree that, look, let's take memory, for example. This is really complicated. I'm going to see if I can do this. There's something called a Baldwin effect, and there's a biologist named James Baldwin that it's coined after. And we all understand, for the most part, genetic transmission. When people think about evolution, they think about, natural selection, and then, less people think about sexual selection. But still, we understand that there are genes that, I'm going to butcher this, but indirectly use and code for proteins that generate structures that constrain the kinds of behaviors that you can do, or even facilitate the kinds of behaviors that you can do indirectly, right?
Hmm.
And so adaptive behaviors, generally speaking, lead to the increased probability of genes continuing into the future. Now, we have this idea of memes. Most people think of memes, they think of the images on Instagram, on social media, and whatnot. But the idea of memes or meme came from Richard Dawkins. He's a biologist, and it's a coin off gene. And so, if a gene is a set of information or a set of biological information, a meme is a an amount of cultural information. It's an idea, it's a story, it's a narrative. And a Baldwin effect, long story short, is what happens where memes allow you to learn adaptive behaviors that increase the potential for your genes to get propagated down through the lineage. And so you have this impact where culture is influencing your genes, which is influencing the culture, and so on and so forth. Okay, why am I saying that? I think that the hero's journey is an example of a Baldwin effect, where our stories contain adaptive examples of value systems that are associated with adaptive patterns of perception and action. Um, I can give an example, but I think I'm saying all of that to try to further your point on the validity of the hero's journey, because I want to take this now into how we think about the world currently and your distinction between personal and societal values, because in my view, it's easy to analyze certain sets of values, let's say associated with Marxism and socialism and flattening the hierarchy as antithetical to the hero's journey, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I'll put it this way. I do agree in the point of what you're saying about how the hero's journey. What's the word that you said when it's how it compounds? What's the
A
word?
Baldwin effect.
The Baldwin effect. Yeah, I do agree with that. So I believe that. So let's look at like stories from word of mouth. Over years, for instance, we have certain stories that were just told. Like there's certain quotes that we all know. Like you said, closed mouths don't get fed. Don't say nothing good if you ain't got it. Don't say nothing bad if you ain't got nothing good to say at all. Things like that. These are quotes that are survival skills in modern society that have lasted throughout generations because of their importance in survival. This same thing goes for the hero's journey. There's some aspect of this story that subconsciously activates something that makes sense to make us get something. So I put it this way. I believe the trick of metaphysics in a true high level metaphysicist is to be able to write a story that subtly teaches a lesson. And so when we talk about storytelling, and I believe I mentioned this in one of our first videos, I believe that the truth, the things that last for a long time are integrated with truth. This is the same concept here. Is that our ability to integrate a deep truth into a simple story is what makes it last. So the hero's journey works. And so let's take it a little deeper. We realize that the hero's journey is an infrastructure for storytelling. You see what I'm saying? So the hero's journey is a medium. The story is the medium. The hero's journey is the architecture that contains truth for any story to make sense. So if you want to have a good story, you can take the hero's journey, follow this structure, and it'll be a good story. Why? Because that hero's journey is the truth that makes your story make sense. And no matter what characters you put over the hero's journey, as long as you follow the format, it will resonate with our epigenetics, with our subconscious truth. And that's kind of what we're looking at here is our ability to realize that truth is always under everything. Our ability to separate the truth from the distorted layer on top of it is what separates us from being able to see the truth in reality. So your personal view is this. The truth, this is so let me put it this way: the societal view is outside. Your personal view is the architect that you were born into. And so we're constantly refining our personal story until we can make sense of the outside story, if that makes sense. So it's like reversing the lens. So when you look at the hero's journey, when you look at any story, you can find the hero's journey in it and see where the truth is. If you look at yourself and find the hero's journey or architectures and structures within yourself, you can now reflect yourself to see the truth outside of you. That's a complicated way of looking at it, but that's kind of how I use metaphysics, is understanding that you can study the infrastructure of reality and then determine what's being put on top of it to get how the space in between of what you can actually work with, what's malleable, because everything on top of the truth is malleable.
I like that. I like to use the terms form and content. And so the hero's journey is the form of the river or the shape of the river. Now the water and the minerals, the dirt, the content, that's ever flowing.
Yep.
flowing, but you've got that initial archetypal shape there. Um, and okay, so now I want to we can bridge we can continue down bridging the personal and the societal, or we can loop in the masculine and the feminine. Um, I'm gonna lay both out for a little bit, and then maybe you pick which one you want to do.
Okay.
Um, so we said earlier on that essentially when people have different values, they see different worlds. And so I think one of the reasons that you and I can have a pretty decent conversation is that much of our foundational values are shared.
I could agree with that.
And I think that as you scale up to more and more people, to families, to communities, neighborhoods, to states, and to cultures, I believe that principle still holds. And I think that cultures vary in their survivability to the degree that the individuals within the culture are aligned with or not aligned with the hero's journey. And that adaptive system of values or architecture of values, that might be a better way to say it, the way that you framed it.
Let me put it this way. I believe that, so when we talk about personal and societal values, so your personal value can only go so far. You see what I'm saying? So the more people, so like you said, as you scale up, the more variety of personal, because as you get more people involved, you're not only battling the amount, like, so the more people you involve, the more variables you add into the societal idea, right? So the personal idea gets harder to push because you now have to argue everybody else's personal ideal to get the other societal idea. So imagine it's like a governmental system. The more people that agree with a concept, that becomes what the whole circle agrees on, right? This is the societal idea. So the idea, I'm not raising my hand. But so the idea here is, how was I gonna tell you? I was gonna word. Oh yeah, so as in order for you to as you involve more people, you refine how close your personal idea is to truth. So if you have a personal idea and it's not close to truth, the more people you talk to about it, the less are going to agree with you. If you have a personal idea and it's rooted in truth, the more people you talk to, the less are going to deny you. Now let's clarify here. If their personal value is distorted from truth, then they're going to disagree with you because they don't understand themselves. This is the weird song and dance that we're doing here. This is why it's hard to have conversations with a large group of people because most of us aren't balanced. And so you can't talk truth to people that aren't balanced because they're attached to falsity. And so they're going to defend their agreement whether or not it's rooted in truth or not. And so this is where the problem that we have to when we talk about societal standards is it's almost impossible to make someone believe something they don't have the experience for. And they don't have the experience for it, I can't teach you this lesson, so therefore I am wrong to you. Unless I can somehow give you the information to subjugate that experience. And it takes a lot more information to switch someone's opinion over than it does the actual experience. So it's much easier to show someone how something works than it is to tell them. And so the problem is, I can't show everyone every experience that I've been through. So I can't always provide the information to show you why I'm so certain. And the truth could be that the one instance that I have of why I'm certain could be a one in a million. And so I'm actually in a smaller percentage of what's true because it happens less. Does that mean I'm wrong? No. But it's just extremely hard to prove your point that what you're talking about exists if you're the only person in the world that can see it. Now let's take it a level deeper to the colorblind and regular sight person. What if somebody has the vision to see the astral or the dream realm or has some type of stigmatism or something that allows them to see something different? Their experience is totally different than everyone else. Are they wrong? Eh. That's really what I think about. So it's like as you scale up, the reality will force you to refine your vision. So the more people that you want to hear you, the better you got to be at delivering the message. That's pretty much what I'm saying.
Yeah. I think maybe if you can talk more about, so let me try to summarize, try to understand what you just said. Individuals have their personal values,
Yes.
and as they interact with, let's just say, one other person, like they're trying to make a friend, their personal values will be
Tested.
challenged to the degree that the other individual's values differ.
Yep. And that means that's how iron sharpens iron, right? And so the question is, do we refine ourselves to build each other up, or are we breaking each other down?
Right. The question that popped into my mind was how do let's just take like you and I, for example, let's just take two individuals meeting each other before we scale up to something more complex. What is the measure of truth that arbitrates the goodness or badness, or I guess I should say truthfulness or falsity of each personal values? Because it seems to me that you could imagine in an intimate relationship, right? Like you have to make an appeal to some third party in a religious sense, perhaps this is God, that helps judge each person because both individuals are limited. And in secular terms, I think what happens is that when, again, let's take a couple, when intimate partners come together, they agree to play a game. They agree to be in this relationship and they develop a vision of what that relationship is. And the relationship is something that's better than the individuals could do on their own. That's why they're together. And it seems to me that that vision of a better future or a better relationship is the kind of third party transcendent source of what's true or what burns away bad values and then keeps good values. Yeah.
So I'll put it this way. This is very interesting because it correlates into something I'm doing with my company as well. So I have this thing called the architecture of sovereignty. So what did I come up with this? I believe that our mind works better when we can conceptualize our structure psychologically. So a lot of people suffer because they don't have any ground to stand on. They don't believe in anything. They don't have any moral code, nothing that they attach to. A lot of people, even religion, don't understand their religion well enough to use it as a foundation, right? So I do agree. There has to be some third party that you use as your rule set for the game. So like the game of life, this is my game. I love the game of life, right? I believe that in a game of life, you have two options. You can pick an existing strategy or you can create your own. That's the real reality here. So what you're asking me is, what's the foundation for those individuals in the conversation? Either they've attached to a modality or a practice, or they have their own idea of it. Now, what do I think is necessary for you to have your own idea? I think you need, well, I use like so we're talking about metaphysics. So four is a square. Square is what? The foundation. So for me, foundationally, you need four concepts to hinge on. For me, that's personal, economic, communal, and um personal, economic, communal, and spiritual. So it's like your personal work, your money, how you do in community, and how you deal with things outside of your control. Understanding those four pillars are how you work. So when you go into a conversation with somebody, I believe every conversation is warfare, subtle warfare, but warfare, because there's an opportunity in every conversation, every interaction you have with something outside of you for one of your foundational pillars of understanding to be destroyed. And so the ability to rebuild those pillars when they are destroyed, that's growth. So I believe that it's your idea as a human being. I believe it's your idea to come into the world, observe the world for enough time until you come up with your own ideas or you attach to someone else's ideas. And at that point, you are fighting a war for your ideas, and we're all fighting a war for some idea. And we're fighting the war for these ideas to refine them until we get to something that actually works. That's the whole point of like society as a school or a prison is that we're refining this idea of how to build a system that's actually beneficial and not degrading, that lasts throughout time.
Okay. So is it safe to say that some of the ways you would measure the goodness of ideas and then thus let's say the goodness of values would be functional utility as it relates to sustainable survival?
Yep. How
Okay.
many people can it save and how long can it last? How many different situations does it apply to? How adaptable is it? How valuable is it? You see what I'm saying? And that's where we talk about. That's where value really comes from because it's like a thing is only as valuable as the amount of situations it can be used for. To me, so the most valuable thing on the planet is people. Why? Because we have an outrageous amount of potential. You see what I'm saying? Some things can only be used three or four different ways. A lot of the things we build, a lot of the technology we use, if it doesn't have electricity, it's shit. Not very valuable. It can break. It's not very valuable. You see what I'm saying? You know how hard it is to break a person? You see? You know how hard it is to you can throw some animals out of a building and they will sit there and cry. A cat will purr and heal his bones and walk the fuck on. You see what I'm saying? Like and it will figure out a new way of living with a broken leg or whatever the fuck it has to do. We're adaptable. So the way I look at this is that human beings, physically and psychologically, are the greatest level of technology. We're the most valuable thing here. We're the most adaptable thing here. Let me tell you something that's more adaptable than us: the fucking planet. Planet not going nowhere. We can't put a dent in this bitch big enough. So we should try to learn from it. What does it do to survive? What are the systems that keep it running? How is it in place? So for me, it's all about how long can you stay stable in the reality? If the reality is the stable point, if it's just the middle friction point, the goal is to stay here as stable as you can as long as you can.
Okay. You pick the next direction, okay? Because I feel like I picked the last one. I either want to go into some of our disagreements about hierarchies, or we could touch on masculinity and femininity as it relates to the hero's journey, because we agree that the hero's journey is the best system of values that we have right now. And with that, there are clear characterizations of masculinity and femininity, and cultures can deviate from those characterizations of masculinity and femininity. And that would imply that cultures that deviate from those ideal characterizations of masculinity and femininity are operating suboptimally. Let's just say that.
Yeah, okay, so um honestly, these two things go together. Because let's answer the question. Why do certain cultures adapt the masculine more than the feminine? Because they want to have more masculine hierarchy. You see what I'm saying? And so the idea here is that people deviate from the only why do people deviate from truth? Why do people distort truth? People distort truth because they want to control it. You can't control the truth. The natural order isn't something that you can control. It already has the way it's set up. It already works the way that it works. You can't change it. A lot of people have a hard time accepting that. So, in denial of the truth, we create false realities. We create distorted versions of truth. And we live in those distorted versions of truth with everybody that we can convince that that's what's going on. And so, when we talk about the this balance of masculine and feminine, in truth, all of these things are balanced. But if we choose to observe them out of balance in any way and take that as truth, then we begin to create distortion. And so, like, what are we talking about? What is distortion? To me, distortion is anything that's out of balance with truth. Truth is anything that can be changed. Anything that's out of balance with truth. Truth is things that can't be changed. There are only a small group of things in this reality that can't be changed. And so the problem is that we want truth out of things that don't have truth to give. That's really the biggest issue here when we talk about. So, like, the truth is, masculine and feminine has nothing to do with boy and girl. Sorry. It really doesn't. It's not that energy. It's more like magnetic and electric. It's positive and negative. It's any two opposites. So we're talking about duality. So let's take away masculine and feminine and let's begin to look at duality. And this goes back to the question you asked earlier. Two things opposite opposed to each other are meant to refine each other. So the reason why we see masculine and feminine things in the hero's journey is because there have to be things to refine each other. Like we said, there have to be these two objective points for us to be able to point at truth. There has to be two things on both sides, both pointing at the same thing and still not getting along. That's masculine and feminine. We are two ideas. We're order and chaos looking at balance. You see what I'm saying? And so that's what I look at when I look at masculine and feminine or all that energy. I see that. And if we take it over to the correlation of the hierarchy thing, I believe that we have hierarchy because I believe hierarchy is a masculine thing, first of all. I believe hierarchy is born out of masculine principles. Because we look at Gaia, Gaia is a feminine principle. Nature has no hierarchy. It has hierarchies, but overall, like if you look at all of nature, there's not one thing in nature that's just blatantly given the resources. We all kind of fight for them, or we work together, but it's not disdain who has what. Some people have better resources to getting things than others, but there's no determining factor. You'd be surprised what you see an ant do. You'd be surprised what you see an elephant do. We don't necessarily stay in our boundaries, and there's nothing forcing us to stay there. Now, there's a logical way of doing things and an illogical way of doing things. That's the masculine side of nature. Does that make sense?
I think I'm stuck on you said there are no hierarchies in nature.
So the point you made last video was the hierarchies in nature, and I kind of want to. I thought about it a bit, and I don't want to say that you're wrong, but I want to point out how masculine and feminine work together in the same environment. So let's put it this way: the planet itself is the feminine entity. It's the womb itself. So the things that are structured on top of the womb are ordered masculinely in a feminine environment. That's what I'm saying here. So the hierarchies that we see in nature are a result of nature's children's thoughts, not nature as an aspect itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying, especially from a symbolic standpoint. Oftentimes, Mother Earth and then the sky
Hmm.
or the heaven is masculine oftentimes. And so
And the stars are ordered in the heavens. You see what I'm saying? Like, see how so when you in it, look at the language that's used for these things, you begin to see how these archetypes are put in the language as well. And so, like, that's why I say, like, you can point at truth because when you begin to point at truth, it's everywhere. Like, you can see it. You like exactly like when you say like the Mother Earth and things of that nature. The Earth is considered feminine, Gaia, spring. This everything sprouts out from the feminine. But once it's out, it's his own thing. So the mind comes in. So, like for instance, some people argue that all bodies are feminine, and that when like male bodies are the distortion, right? From my understanding. So it's the same concept. So if the body itself is feminine, and then when the X or Y chromosome is cut or whatever it does to make the masculine body, the masculine is the offshoot of the feminine host. So the mind is feminine to the body, is the masculine to the feminine body. Make sense? Because the
yes,
sperm is correlated to the brain and the nervous system.
right. And then so principle of opposites, even within femininity, you have positive and negative, or even when
Mm.
you think about nature, you have its creative aspect and its destructive aspect.
You have love and you have destruction. Yep. Love and
Right.
chaos.
And in masculinity, you have order and tyranny, or
Yep.
safety, but also rigidity. And I see these, let's say, four characters in a dynamic where they interact with each other. And so I see hierarchy as, let's say, yes, a creation of nature, but it is also, it's not like I don't see hierarchy as an independent or random creation of nature, because you could imagine that given that there's a hierarchy, what part of what the devouring mother or the terrible mother wants is life to return to her. So that way she can also continue, just as death is a way of fertilizing the earth. And so I see I'm not denying the masculine element of hierarchies. I guess I'm trying to add a dynamic and interacting twist into um, the ordered nature that is a thing, and the capacity for, let's say, hierarchies to become chaotic and feminine as
So
well.
let me put it this way. So there's so when I like the way you worded that because it points out to one of my biggest things is like this goes back to the idea of the form and you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
form of it is that there has to be a masculine and feminine dynamic or a positive and negative. And so the aspect of how that the how the hierarchy is structured is fluid. So I guess I could agree. Hierarchy is necessary because, like, when we look at the reason why I'm thinking about this and I'm thinking so hard on it, because what you made me think of is you think about the Hindu pantheon, and in the Hindu pantheon, not only are there a male and female, like there's a trinity, but there's a male and female for the trinity, and the males and females of those trinities have positive and negative aspects. So it's like six. So like you see each being, and each being has a positive and a negative, and this is what we're talking about here. That's why I say like studying certain cultures gives you this full lens where you see like some people try to water it down. Hindu is like, no, here we got ambidextrous male and female gods. We got Ganesh. We got this and that going on, and so it gives you the whole family tree aspect of this Sumerian god pantheon. And what it's really just describing to you is that how can I word this? So the point that I was making earlier was that the earth is feminine and that hierarchy is masculine. I say that because structurally what I believe is that the feminine is the body and the mind and the masculine is the structure. So like the feminine is the casing, like it's a womb, it's the outside, it's space. That like the dark mother to me is the vacuum of space itself. It represents that's the chaotic energy we're talking about. It's not necessarily like chaos and destruction. It's just it's not order. It's not a rule. It's not. You see what I'm saying? So like, for instance, if we talk about the tree of life, we say that source was here first. Some people argue that the masculine comes before the feminine. I'm in the headspace that the feminine comes first. There was the source spread out to the void. That's the feminine. So the earth is that void. And then the masculine ordered the heavens. It put the stars and everything in place for it to be there. So to me, the hierarchy, what we see as hierarchy here, I see as the rotations of the planet in the skies. Same concept. But our hierarchy was man-made and is still refining itself. So it breaks every so often. That's all we're talking about. Is that it's incorrect? It's imperfect. It's not finished yet. It ain't really. It don't really work for what we have.
absolutely agreed. Absolutely agreed. And here's okay. Do you mind if I tell my understanding of the Mesopotamian creation story with the
Go ahead.
Tiamat? Okay, here's my understanding. Okay. The first gods for the Mesopotamian creation mythology were Apsu and Tiamat. Apsu's the father, Tiamat's the serpentine dragon mother. And they are interlocked together. Again, masculine, feminine, but it's clearly, from my understanding, Tiamat who gives birth to a whole set of, let's say, mini gods. And for some reason, these mini gods are like children and they're like rambunctious and they end up killing Apsu. They kill the father. And so Tiamat is angry and the mini gods are like they run away and then Tiamat creates Kingu and a whole slew of demons to go out and fight them. And the mini gods are struggling and they don't know what to do. And one of the gods amongst them, named Marduk, comes up and says, "All right, I think I can defeat Tiamat. If I do, you guys all have to subordinate yourselves to me." And the thing that's cool about Marduk is that he essentially speaks magic words, or he uses wind and breath to create order out of chaos, and he has eyes all around his head. And so he pays attention and he speaks magic words. Maybe that's the logos from the Bible, but whatever. The logic you're speaking of, which is so cool. And so he goes, fights Tiamat. He has a net, and so he uh traps her in a net, and so he forms her, right? which is so interesting. He gives her shape because she's a chaotic dragon. He gives her shape, and then I think he uses his powerful speech to blow wind into her to inflate her, so that way she's like a perfect sphere or perfectly shaped. And then he cuts her up and makes the world out of her. And so I like the idea of the masculine is kind of in there with Apsu, but really you have the hero and the mother there. And I left out some parts, but our hierarchies are imperfect. And I think what I'm trying to say and what I think you can extrapolate from that Mesopotamian story is that it's the hero who pays attention and is aligned with truth, perhaps, truthful speech that is able to evoke the proper mode of transformation that will help repair everything, including hierarchies.
Yeah, and so like and so this is the really powerful thing about the hero's journey because when we begin to look at this story, I love this is why I love metaphysics and I love the hero's journey. I love metaphysics because the metaphysics tells you there's 1,000 versions of this hero's journey. The hero's journey tells you how to interpret it. Now let's take a look at what you just told. I want to give you another version of the story. Are you familiar with the Christ Sophia story?
No.
Ah, the Gnostic version of Christian text. And this is why I think Christians are full of shit, but I don't know how true it is. So when you look at this, it's just like, ooh, this is real bad for Christianity. Not in a bad way, but it's just like y'all left all these books out, and this was with y'all text, and y'all just didn't want to, whatever. But so when you look at the text, you get the Christ Sophia story. To make a long story short, the Christ Sophia story, Sophia is Tiamat, same thing here. But she's in this story, she's the goddess of wisdom, or she's the archon of wisdom. And in her wisdom, she believes that she could do what God is doing, for lack of a better term. She could create a world. She could create of her own fruition without God's balance to her creation. And so she creates Yada, which is what we know to be the demiurge or God, Yahweh, in most texts. And so what you realize is that she's banished for this from heaven. And when she's banished from heaven, she allows Yada to create his own world. And he creates the 12 zodiac, he creates 365 days, and he creates this whole system that we live in here. And so what you look at with this story is you realize that there's some aspect of history or the psychological story that wants us to understand that the feminine created a mini masculine that's kind of distorted and fucked up, but he helps figure everything else out to keep it stable for long enough for us to get on. And so some people say that he's demonic and it's a blasphemy for his creation. Some people consider the demiurge to be a fake god in between us and source. That's what the whole Gnostic thing is. But when you look at the story from the Mesopotamian side, you're like, wait, so the kids killed the father. Where do we know the kids killing father? So let's look at the Greek and Roman mythology. Why is that story repeated multiple times? Why do the gods always kill their parents? And even if you look at the Greek and Roman mythology, not only did the gods kill, not only did Zeus kill his parents, but the generation before them killed the Titans or the whatever it was. You know what I'm saying? So the gods killed the Titans had killed they parents. It's generational stories of them killing each other. The reason why Kronos was eating his kids is because he killed his dad. What's the story here? What are we trying to tell here? You know what I'm saying? And I think that's what I believe is interesting. And I can't even say that I really just figured it out, to be honest with you. But I believe that there's an aspect of this that's telling us something more. Like this is why I believe in the epigenetic story. This is why I believe in the hero's journey, because no matter what culture we look at, what story we look at, we're dancing around this same topic for a millennia. It has to be some point to it. And I think the point of it is it has to do with ascension and understanding yourself. And it has something to do with how we work with our DNA and our bodies and whatever. Like it's a deep thing. It's really crazy. And so if there's anything that I would want to build on, it's like really understanding and maybe trying to unpack some of these subtle lessons that we can find by connecting these different stories and what they have. That's something that I've been working on. If we talk about a lot of the writing and stuff that I have, it's like, all right, so 200 angels fell to earth. These 200 angels are supposedly sent by God to order us and teach us language. And eh, bro, one day we're gonna go through all of that. But the whole 200 angel watchers thing, the different understanding how different cultures adjust the teachings of these different watchers, supposedly, and it's just the whole thing. And so when you start, I've been trying to go backwards through this story to figure out what's going on and what the original story was. And along the way, you find out a lot of, you see how many things repeat, and that's to me truth. Like over these, if you look at all of the bigger heroes' journeys and the parts of the story that are repeated multiple times in different stories, I believe that story put together is the actual story, the best version of the story we have. And the ability to create that and correlate all of that and then sit down and discuss it with some people that actually understand the breadth of it would be interesting.
I agree, man. I agree. And I agree. And it's so, you know, neuroscientifically, it is true that what you remember is not a set of objective facts. It's what's meaningful to you.
Hmm.
You know, and you said that earlier. You said that you remember what's exciting to you, what's engaging to you, what interests you, right? And some of these stories, either the actual stories or the archetypal foundations of the stories, like you're saying, the repeating motifs, the hostile brothers, the great mother, all of those things. Some of these stories and motifs have been with us for maybe tens of thousands of years. And that's just at a cultural level. We, according to some theorists, acted out those stories first in a pre-oral ritual. And
Hmm.
so you can just keep you can, and then if you stack on evolutionary theory, like who knows how old these stories are if you understand or believe that they are representations of patterns of action that we acted out first with
That we figured out through
sacrifice.
action and then translated into the story.
And then
Bro.
use metaphor, right? Like if we use like you imagine that there's this book, The Fruit, the Tree, and the Serpent by Lynn Isbell, where she says that much of our visual system is the way it is in part because we co-evolved with snakes for 60 million years. And why do we use that snake metaphor or dragons or why are dragons serpentine-like creatures along with some combination of other predators like predatory cats and predatory birds? It's like we had these experiences that we eventually somehow with our increased cognitive ability started talking about them.
And compartmentalizing them into categories. And then, I think it's so interesting. And I'm gonna tell you a good way to look at this. A lot of people miss this. Bro, Native American logic is crazy. The Mayan astrology system is crazy. The Chinese astrology system is a little more interesting than ours. So when you start looking at these, how are animals used as symbols in society and why? Why does the vulture mean so much for Native Americans? Why does the eagle mean so much? What do squirrels and chipmunks mean in the spiritual community? These animals have created a meaning based off of how they act, how they move, how they interact with the environment. We've learned so much through observation, and so much is communicated, like you said, through symbols, through metaphors, through poetry. A lot of times we don't understand the generations of knowledge that come from a simple sentence. Like there's so much knowledge in there. There's so much experience. There's so much like, and that's why I say we don't realize that we're built on the shoulder for ancestors. Fuck the apartment. We was no, bro, we got sentences, bro. We understand each other. We got a whole dictionary of words, nigga. That took a long time. Like that took a long time, bro. We didn't get here. We didn't get here fast, bro. That's the part we missed, bro. It took time to communicate ideas. This is a complicated process. Like to be able to, we're communicating ideas across the planet instantaneously, and we got AI check systems. We're far, 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 far away from the click tone language that's dying in Africa right now. Miles away. And you know, a lot of things had to die for us to get here. And I think that's the part that we miss. We have a lot, but billions of cultures were dead to fuck wrong. Billions of religions were dead to fuck wrong. And wrong doesn't mean that you're just evil. Wrong in this world means you die. One way or another. Somebody else get to you or you kill yourself. You wrong long enough, something gonna happen to you. That's the rules of the world.
Yeah.
I don't have to, I don't, and that's why I don't believe you have to go kill evil people. They will kill themselves if you get the fuck out the way. You don't have to bother them. They will blow themselves the fuck up or piss off the wrong person, one way or the other, or piss off nature. They gonna bother some shit they ain't got no business bothering. I'm not trying to stop evil people. I'm just trying to stay out their way.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe okay, maybe next conversation. This was great. I really enjoyed this one. I wonder if so you said wrong just meant death essentially, which I completely agree with, and that is aligned with, evolutionary biology. Like it's that checks out. This might be controversial, but again, for next topic, maybe you mentioned before how masculinity and femininity don't really have anything to do with boys and girls. Uh, I would say kinda, I would offer that it is our long experience with male and female that created the metaphorical understandings of masculine and femininity. But okay, that's not what I wanted to get into. I wanted to say that what if another form of being wrong is not reproducing? Because that brings in the whole dynamic between male and female and how men and women are supposed to act properly.
If, like you said, if being wrong is death, being right would mean you lived all the experiences you were meant to bring here to live. I don't believe everybody is genetically engineered to have children. I believe some people are genetically, like some people physically just can't have kids. That's not your thing. So I don't believe that it's to say that their life is wrong, but I believe understanding what's right is understanding what your entire potential is and not hindering yourself from it or having a thought frame or habits that hinder you from it.
Okay, how about this? Let me try a different spin though. Then, well, how about this? I mean, one of the reasons that a culture could die is that they just stop propagating.
Yeah.
Okay. So not that's not necessarily a
But
personal
see,
level.
propagating doesn't always have to be because propagating from a culture could be teaching somebody else your culture.
So now you're talking about the memes surviving, but not necessarily
The people.
the people surviving. Okay, so
What if your belief outlasts you? Did it die?
that's fine, but are the beliefs, is that what you meant by death? Like, or did you mean that the humans are dying, or did you mean the beliefs are dying when you said that to be wrong is death?
Both. Because a person can, if the last person propagating a belief dies and he didn't teach it to nobody else, then the belief died. Or that's not even true because if the book is still here and somebody picks up the book, the belief could die and come back to life.
Okay, I mean, I agree, but I would say, like, would you agree that if the when I
Think
say
of
the culture,
neo-Nazis.
what's that?
Think of neo-Nazis. Culture died, but it's coming back.
Got it. So the memes survive, but if would you agree that wrong? You're saying death, okay, and you said that death. If your memes are wrong, then the memes die. Would you also extend that to genes? Then is what I'm saying.
So what I'm saying is that a culture down it's a lot. I'll put it this way. It's my aspiration to build a mindset or a modality that outlives me. I hope to build a mindset or a way of thinking that outlives me. To me, that's immortality. because my thoughts extend past my body. Make sense? But I also like, for instance, like I believe that's when we talk about the whole death and rebirth thing. So, like, what's the rebirth of Christ? What if the rebirth of Christ is us coming in back into his actual teachings? You see what I'm saying? So we can argue that the way that we live as Christians now are outside of God, outside of Jesus' actual teachings. A lot of cultures do believe, a lot of practices do believe this, that Jesus was more of a he was more of a yogi than he was a Christian, and that he had secret teachings that he taught to Paul, or that he told Paul that people would understand later because they weren't ready for the teachings that he actually came to teach. This is things that you can find in different cultures. So the idea here would be that the Christian faith as we know it died for its true self to be reborn. This is an argument that some people make about Christianity, is that we're waiting for the return of Christ. We're waiting for the return of Christ consciousness, or the true balanced version of Christianity to return. See what I'm saying? So no, so I believe that you can physically die. And I believe that a culture can die if no one else is following it. Another way of looking at this, I don't know if you read the American Gods book or seen the American Gods series, but those gods died when people stopped believing in them. Their amount of power was correlated to how many people prayed to them. This is the same concept. No one praying to you, you're broken homes. A lot of people pray to you, big mansion in the hills. Imagine this is the concept when we talk about belief systems. The more power it gets is based off the amount of people that give it energy. And it's dead or alive based off of that amount of people. But death isn't permanent, it's just stasis because no one's picked it up yet.
I agree with that. I'm just trying to find the connection to the living human being. Like, is your goal and your endeavor to help people live? Or like, do you want life to continue or do you want the memes to continue? Or is it both?
I want to create a meme that encourages everyone to see it to live better.
Why?
I don't need a good reason because I want to help. Self-righteous goals.
You said because you want to help?
Yep, the world is shit. I don't see any. I can't change it, but I can add my 2 cents and try my best. What else can I do? To me,
Okay.
that's the best solution. Like for me, everybody complains about the world. My response to that is find your solution and make it as possible. Make it happen. And if
So
your solution just happens to be the solution that everybody needs, then you save the world.
so you would judge the goodness or badness of memes or a set of memes on their ability to promote life.
Yep.
Okay. So it does so you're okay, so it's not like idolatry or anything where it's like you said that. You said this before, right? It's not like you're not trapped in a dogma where it's like this meme is right. No, it's whichever meme promotes life because life is what you're aiming at here.
And what
And that
promotes
yeah.
life is different to every person. So
Yes.
something that will work for me and be motivating for me may not be motivating for somebody else. So for me to say that something is worthless, I don't know. It might be valuable to somebody. So one man's trash is another man's treasure. This is where we get into the quantum aspect of this and why it's so hard to eliminate evil. That's why we have a struggle with finding a solution here because we're trying to eliminate evil. No, we don't want to eliminate evil. We want to change how people react to what they perceive as evil.
We should okay, that's another thing. When you say okay, I agree with what you just said about evil. And we agreed on the meme is the means by which we're trying to promote life, which is the higher goal. We're not attached to any one meme, but at the same time, to the best of our knowledge, but we're still seeking, we could be wrong. We agree that the meme of the hero's journey is the best that we have right now. And so that's what we're operating off of. But even that is subject to other transformations and gaining more knowledge and et cetera, et cetera. And so so putting that aside, what you just said about evil there, what popped into my mind was integrating the shadow.
hmm
So maybe that's a relatively good, maybe that's a more practical topic for next conversation, like characterizing evil and the shadow and what it means to integrate it and not suppress it, not let it possess you, but to be in proper relationship with it, be in a harmonious, balanced relationship with it, like you've been saying.
I'm all for it. That could be the next topic because that's
Okay.
a build itself for sure.
Okay. Okay. Dope. Dope. All right. I'm gonna stop recording though.
Okay.